The lecture hall fell silent as Commander Vrok'tar adjusted the holographic display, his 4 eyes gleaming with barely concealed satisfaction. This was always his favorite part of the orientation, watching the new recruits squirm when they learned about the galaxy's most notorious death world. Class 17-9, he began, his mandibles clicking together in what passed for a smile among his species. Today, we discuss survival protocols for extreme environment planets. Let us begin with the worst of them all. The display flickered to life, showing a rotating blue and green sphere that looked deceptively peaceful from orbit. Several cadets leaned forward, their various appendages twitching with curiosity. This, Vrok'tar announced with dramatic flair, is designated as Terra. Some species call it Earth. I call it a cosmic mistake that somehow developed sentient life. A nervous chittering ran through the assembled students. 43 cadets from 17 different species, all of them having heard the rumors, the whispered warnings passed down through generations of Galactic Academy graduates. Earth. The name alone was enough to make seasoned soldiers check their environmental suits twice. Vrok'tar paced across the platform, his tail swishing behind him. Let me paint you a picture, recruits. Imagine a world where the very atmosphere is corrosive enough to rust metal, where liquid dihydrogen monoxide falls from the sky in quantities sufficient to drown entire cities, where the ground itself splits open and spews molten rock without warning. He paused for effect, watching the color drain from several faces, well, the ones who had faces and color to drain. The gravity, he laughed, a sound like grinding gears. 0.98 standard units. Enough to crush your bones if you're not from a heavy world species. The temperature swings from frozen wastelands to blazing deserts within a single planetary rotation. And don't even get me started on the microbial life. A small gelatinous student in the third row raised a tentacle hesitantly. Commander, surely no intelligent species could evolve in such conditions. Vrok'tar's eyes brightened. That is where you are catastrophically wrong, Cadet Plexo. Not only did intelligence evolve there, it thrived. It conquered. It built civilizations that climbed out of the muck and reached for the stars while their planet actively tried to kill them every single day. He pulled up another image, this one showing various Earth fauna, a creature with enormous teeth and claws, something that swam with rows of razor-sharp chompers, and another that appeared to be made entirely of muscle and bad intentions. These, he said with grim satisfaction, are just the animals. The prey animals, mind you. The things that the dominant species had to hunt to survive. Let that sink in for a moment, shall we? The lecture hall erupted in shocked murmurs. In the front row a single figure sat perfectly still, neither gasping nor chittering with the others, just watching, listening, waiting. Vrok'tar continued, warming to his subject. Now, the Academy's survival course includes a simulation of Earth conditions. Note that I said simulation, not the real thing. We are not monsters. We will not actually send you there. He paused. Most of you would not survive the landing anyway. More nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. The simulation runs for 72 standard hours. You will face fluctuating temperatures, hostile wildlife, again simulated, and environmental hazards that include storms, seismic activity, and what the humans call weather. Your task is simple: survive. Bonus points for actually finding food and shelter. A hulking cadet from Margox Prime, all muscle and confidence, raised a massive claw. Commander, how many cadets typically complete this course? Vrok'tar's mandibles twitched into something resembling a grin. Excellent question, Cadet Gorman. The pass rate is approximately 12%. Most fail within the first 6 hours. The record for quickest failure, 47 minutes. Cadet tried to drink the rainwater without purification. Spent the next week in medical. Gorman's confidence visibly deflated. But here is the truly terrifying part, Vrok'tar said, lowering his voice to force everyone to lean in. 3 cycles ago, the Galactic Council made first contact with Earth. We extended the hand of friendship, offered them a place among the stars, showed them our advanced technology and peaceful alliance of species. He pulled up footage of the first contact ceremony, Humans in formal attire, looking small and fragile next to their galactic counterparts. Do you know what they said when we showed them our most elite military training programs? Vrok'tar's laugh was sharp and bitter. They asked if they could send observers, said it reminded them of something they called summer camp for children. The lecture hall exploded in disbelief. Summer camp for children on a death world. Yes, Vrok'tar shouted over the noise. These creatures, these humans, they deliberately expose their young to outdoor survival scenarios for recreation, for fun. They swim in natural bodies of water filled with predators. They climb mountains for no tactical or resource-gathering purpose. They jump out of perfectly functional aircraft with nothing but fabric to slow their descent, and they do it for entertainment. The figure in the front row still hadn't moved, still watching, still waiting. Vrok'tar noticed but dismissed it. Always a few cadets who thought they were tough enough, smart enough, prepared enough. The simulation would teach them otherwise. Now, he said, pulling up a roster on his datapad, let us discuss which of you will be participating in this cycle's Earth survival course. All combat track students are required to complete it before advancement. Medical and engineering tracks are encouraged but not mandated. He began reading names, and with each one a cadet either stood proudly or slumped in resignation. Cadet Plixo. Cadet Gorman. Cadet Zintara. Cadet. He paused, his eyes scanning down the list to an entry that made his mandibles freeze mid-click. Cadet Morgan Lee, he read slowly, looking up to scan the crowd. Front row. Stand and identify yourself. The figure rose smoothly, and for the first time, the other students got a clear look at their classmate. Bipedal. Bilateral symmetry. No visible natural weapons. Soft, fragile-looking skin. Hair on the head but nowhere else visible. 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 nose, 1 mouth. Commander Vrok'tar felt something he rarely experienced. Genuine shock followed immediately by creeping dread. You are human, he stated, his voice flat. Yes, Commander, Morgan replied, their voice calm and steady. Is there a problem with my enrollment? Every eye in the lecture hall turned to stare. A human. In the Galactic Academy, about to take a course simulating their own homeworld's conditions. Vrok'tar's throat sac inflated and deflated several times as he processed this information. Somewhere in the admissions department, someone had either made a catastrophic error or possessed a sense of humor dark enough to frighten void dwellers. No problem, he finally managed. No problem at all, Cadet Lee. I am certain you will find the experience quite... He searched for the right word. Morgan sat back down, and Vrok'tar swore he saw the ghost of a smile cross that peculiar flat face. The commander cleared his throat and continued with the roster, but his rhythm was broken. His carefully prepared lecture suddenly felt hollow. He had spent the last hour explaining how deadly and horrifying Earth was to a room that contained someone who had grown up there, breathed that corrosive atmosphere, swam in that toxic dihydrogen monoxide, survived those temperature extremes. Someone who was now going to take a simulation of their own backyard as a military survival course. Class dismissed, Vrok'tar announced abruptly, 30 minutes earlier than scheduled. Report to Orientation Hall 7 tomorrow at 0600 for simulation briefing and equipment assignment. As the cadets filed out, chattering excitedly among themselves, Vrok'tar caught Morgan's eye one more time. The human smiled then, really smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret, someone who was about to teach an entire academy why you should never ever underestimate a species from a death world. Commander Vrok'tar suddenly wondered if 12% was about to become a very different number. The simulation bay hummed with barely contained energy as 43 cadets assembled in their assigned zones. Each species had been provided with standard-issue environmental suits calibrated for Earth conditions, medical monitors, emergency beacons, and a single survival pack containing tools their species had deemed essential. Commander Vrok'tar stood on the observation platform, watching the preparations with grim satisfaction. This never got old. Watching overconfident recruits realize that theoretical knowledge meant absolutely nothing when the wind was howling and the temperature was dropping, and every instinct in their body screamed that they were going to die. "Attention, cadets." His voice boomed through the speakers. "You have 5 minutes to complete your equipment checks. Once the simulation begins, you will be scattered across a 50-kilometer zone designed to replicate Earth's most, shall we say, challenging biomes. Your suits will protect you from immediate death, but they will not make this comfortable. They are not supposed to." He pulled up the environmental parameters on the main display. Day 1 will feature what humans call autumn in their temperate zones. Expect temperatures between 5 and 15 degrees standard. Precipitation is likely. Wind speeds averaging 20 to 30 kilometers per hour with gusts up to 50. Several cadets exchanged worried glances. Those were combat conditions on most civilized worlds. Day 2. Vrok'tar continued with evident pleasure. "We increase the difficulty. Temperature drops to below freezing, snowfall, reduced visibility. And just to keep things interesting, we will introduce some of Earth's charming wildlife, simulated of course, but programmed with authentic behavioral patterns." Cadet Gorman, the massive Margoxian, was busy strapping on what appeared to be enough equipment to survive a planetary siege. Extra power cells, thermal generators, portable shelter units, enough ration packs to feed a small army. 3 zones over, Morgan Lee stood with a single small pack and a lightweight suit that looked disturbingly inadequate. Vrok'tar's eyes narrowed. "Cadet Lee, did you not receive the equipment list?" "I did, Commander," Morgan replied, not looking up from the simple blade they were inspecting. "I chose to travel light." "Light?" Vrok'tar's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "Cadet, this is not a stroll through a park. You will face actual survival conditions. Where is your thermal generator, your emergency shelter, your supplemental oxygen supply?" Morgan finally looked up, and that smile was back. That knowing, absolutely infuriating smile. "With respect, Commander, I grew up in Seattle. This is going to be like visiting my grandmother's house in Montana. I will be fine." The other cadets stared. Seattle, Montana. These meant nothing to them, but the casual way Morgan said it, the complete absence of fear or concern that registered loud and clear. Vrok'tar felt his spine ridges bristle. "Very well, Cadet. Your overconfidence has been noted. Try not to trigger your emergency beacon within the first hour. It reflects poorly on your entire cohort." "Yes, Commander," Morgan said, and had the audacity to sound amused. "Simulation begins in 60 seconds. Vrok'tar announced. "Remember your training. Remember your protocols. And remember that pride has killed more soldiers than enemy fire." The lights dimmed. The air shimmered, and reality bent. The first thing that hit was the cold. Not the killing cold of space, but the wet, biting cold that somehow wormed through every gap and seal, the kind that made your bones ache and your breath steam. Cadet Plixo materialized in a dense forest, their gelatinous form immediately beginning to stiffen in the low temperature. The emergency protocols kicked in, heating elements activating, but the cold was relentless, seeping, invasive. Gorman appeared on a rocky hillside, his massive frame actually working against him for once as the wind threatened to topple him over. He deployed his shelter immediately, anchoring it against the gusts with pile drivers that barely penetrated the frozen ground. Across the simulation zone, cadets scrambled and panicked, and fought against an environment that simply did not care about their technology or their training or their very legitimate fear. And Morgan tilted their face up to the sky, felt the first drops of rain beginning to fall, and started walking. 6 hours in, the first emergency beacon activated. Cadet Plixo, overcome by hypothermia despite the heating elements, medical extraction, immediate disqualification. Hour 8. 3 more beacons. A Felixian who had tried to climb a tree for shelter and learned that Earth trees did not appreciate being climbed by species with acidic secretions. A Quantari who had attempted to drink from a stream and discovered that Earth water contained minerals that reacted violently with their biochemistry, and a Deltorian who had simply given up after their shelter collapsed for the 3rd time. Commander Vrok'tar watched the tracker displays with grim satisfaction. 12% pass rate. Like clockwork. Like always. Then his eyes found Morgan's beacon, and his satisfaction curdled into confusion. The human was moving, not frantically, not in circles, but with purpose and direction. While other cadets huddled in their shelters or stumbled through the underbrush, Morgan was covering ground at a steady pace, heading toward what the simulation had designated as a particularly nasty section of the zone. "Pull up visual on Cadet Lee," Vrok'tar ordered. The screen flickered, showing Morgan walking through the rain like it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. No shelter, no visible distress, just walking, occasionally stopping to examine plants or test the direction of the wind. "Are their suit systems functioning?" Vrok'tar demanded. "Are the environmental parameters correctly calibrated for their zone?" "Affirmative, Commander," the technician replied, checking the data. "Temperature is 7 degrees standard. Rainfall moderate. Wind gusts to 45 kilometers per hour. All within specified parameters." "But, Commander." "What?" "Cadet Lee's suit heating system is operating at minimal power. They have manually reduced it to 20% capacity." Vrok'tar's throat sac inflated dangerously. "They what? Why would they do that?" "They will freeze." The technician's expression was deeply confused. "According to their biometric readings, Commander, they are not cold. Their core temperature is stable. They appear to be, and I am reading this correctly, comfortable." On screen, Morgan knelt beside a fallen log, pulled out that simple blade, and began stripping bark with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, they had collected a pile of dry tinder from the protected underside, arranged it carefully, and produced fire using nothing but friction and patience. Fire, using primitive methods, in the rain, like it was the most natural thing in the galaxy. Vrok'tar watched in stunned silence, as Morgan constructed a small shelter using branches and leaves, positioned it to block the wind, and settled in to wait out the storm with the casual ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Because Vrok'tar realized with creeping horror, they probably had. Day 2. Temperature dropped. Snow began to fall. 21 cadets remained, and most of them were burning through power reserves at an alarming rate just to stay alive. The simulation introduced the wildlife. Wolves, the program called them. Pack hunters. Predators, that worked together with terrifying efficiency. Cadet Gorman, despite his size and strength, nearly lost 3 fingers to a simulated wolf bite before his suit's defense systems drove the pack away. His emergency beacon was halfway activated before pride made him stop. But the wolves that encountered Morgan Lee learned something that no simulation could have prepared them for. They learned that humans were also pack hunters, also predators, and that on Earth, they were not the prey species. Morgan stood their ground when the pack approached, making themselves large, making noise, projecting confidence and threat in equal measure. The wolves, programmed with authentic behavioral patterns, recognized something in this small bipedal creature, something old, something dangerous. They backed off. Then Morgan did something that made Vrok'tar's blood run cold. They followed the wolves, tracked them through the snow, learned their patterns, their territory, their habits, not as prey fleeing a predator, but as a fellow hunter, observing competitors. "What are they doing?" Vrok'tar whispered, watching the screen with horrified fascination. "I believe," the technician said slowly, "Cadet Lee is conducting reconnaissance, gathering information about local wildlife behavior and territory boundaries to better navigate the simulation zone." They were learning from predators. While most cadets were hiding or fleeing or barely surviving, the human was taking notes. 72 hours. End of simulation. 5 cadets remained when the environmental parameters reset, and the zone dissolved back into the sterile simulation bay. 5 out of 43. Better than average, actually. Cadet Gorman stumbled out of the bay, his suit scorched and battered, his supplies exhausted, his pride thoroughly demolished but intact. He had survived. Barely. Cadet Sintara emerged shaking but triumphant, having spent the entire 3 days in a hole they had dug and refusing to leave it for any reason. Survival by absolute minimal exposure. 2 others, species Vrok'tar, barely registered, looking traumatized but alive. and Morgan Lee, walking out like they were returning from a pleasant afternoon hike, their small pack still mostly full, their suit barely used, and that smile wider than ever. "Cadet Lee," Vrok'tar said, his voice carefully controlled. "Report." "Yes, Commander." Morgan stood at attention, but there was laughter in their eyes. The simulation was adequate. Honestly, easier than I expected. The wolves were well programmed though. Good behavioral modeling. My compliments to your technical team. Adequate. Easier than expected. Vrok'tar felt something shift in his understanding of the galaxy. For years he had taught cadets about the horrors of death worlds, the impossibility of Earth, the exceptional danger of environments that could kill without mercy. He had never considered what it meant that something survived there, that something thrived there, that something conquered that world, and then looked to the stars and thought, what else is out there? "Dismissed, Cadet," he managed. "All of you. Excellent work. You have earned rest." As the cadets filed out, exhausted and traumatized and changed, Morgan paused at the door. "Commander, permission to speak freely." "Granted," Vrok'tar said wearily. "That simulation was set to autumn conditions in a temperate zone, right? Relatively mild, all things considered." "Yes, Cadet. That is correct." Morgan's smile turned absolutely wicked. "You should see winter in Alaska, or summer in the Sahara, or monsoon season in Bangladesh, or literally any time of year in Australia." They paused. "Those would make excellent advanced simulations. I would be happy to consult." And with that, Morgan Lee left, leaving behind a commander whose entire worldview had just been thoroughly, completely, and irreversibly shattered. The pass rate had been 12%. It would remain 12% for non-human cadets. But Vrok'tar had a sinking feeling that for humans this course was not a test of survival. It was a vacation.